At exactly 2:13 a.m., an emergency intercom inside an abandoned jail cell activated by itself. Officers rushed to respond, expecting a medical emergency. But cell 14 had been empty for 3 years. The inmate assigned to that cell was officially dead, and when security checked the cameras, someone was standing inside the locked cell, staring directly into the hallway camera without moving. Officer Daniel Reyes had worked county corrections long enough to stop reacting emotionally to almost anything inside the jail. 8 years of overnight shifts had turned violence, overdoses, and screaming inmates into part of his normal routine. The county jails itself never truly slept. Even at 3 a.m., distant shouting echoed through ventilation ducts beneath flickering fluorescent lights. But one section of the facility felt wrong in a way Reyes couldn't explain. D Block, an abandoned housing unit isolated behind rusting security gates and a long underground hallway officers called the Tunnel. Officially, the county sealed it because of flooding, mold, and structural damage. Unofficially, deputies whispered about something far darker. Too many inmates had died there over the years. Suicides, stabbings, overdoses. Even veteran officers refused to walk through D Block alone after midnight. Among all the abandoned cells inside D Block, one number carried a reputation nobody liked discussing openly. Cell 14. The cell sat halfway down the lower tier beneath a flickering light that maintenance never seemed able to repair. Most officers refused to even look through its narrow, reinforced window while walking past. Reyes originally assumed the stories were just normal jail superstition. Every correctional facility develops rumors over time because officers spend years surrounded by violence, isolation, and unstable people. Strange noises become stories. Stories become legends. But older deputies reacted differently whenever Cell 14 was mentioned. Their expressions changed. Conversations stopped. Some officers would quietly change subjects entirely. One deputy once told Reyes that inmates assigned to Cell 14 never lasted long mentally. Several claimed they heard whispering inside the walls late at night. Others stopped sleeping entirely. A few begged officers to move them somewhere else. Most requests were ignored because jail administrators believed the inmates were manipulating staff. Then the deaths started happening. One inmate sliced his throat using broken plastic. Another repeatedly smashed his own head against the concrete wall. One hung himself using tied bedsheets. Eventually, the cell was sealed after the last death 3 years earlier. Since then, nobody entered it anymore. The first incident happened during an ordinary night shift in October. Around 2:13 a.m., Central Control suddenly received an emergency intercom activation from D Block. Normally, those activations meant an inmate required immediate medical attention or was reporting violence inside a housing unit. But D Block was abandoned. No inmates were housed there anymore. Control officers initially assumed it was a wiring malfunction caused by water damage in the old unit. One deputy joked that rats were probably chewing through electrical cables inside the walls. A maintenance request was submitted, and the incident was forgotten, until it happened again the following night. Exactly 2:13 a.m. 10 seconds of static through the intercom system before shutting off. Then again the next night. Same time, same duration, same abandoned cell. Maintenance crews inspected the wiring twice and found nothing wrong. Electricians replaced sections of the communication panel, but the activations continued every night without explanation. Eventually, officers stopped responding altogether because nobody wanted to walk through D Block during graveyard shift unless absolutely necessary. Still, the intercom activations kept happening like clockwork. Every single night at exactly 2:13 a.m. Reyes found it irritating more than frightening at first. But one older officer reacted differently after hearing the cell number involved. And that reaction changed everything. Officer Luis Morales had worked county corrections for over 22 years and was only months away from retirement. He was the type of deputy younger officers trusted immediately because nothing seemed capable of rattling him anymore. Morales had survived riots, inmate assaults, hostage incidents, and lockdowns without ever losing control emotionally. One night during break, Reyes casually mentioned the strange intercom activations while both men sat drinking stale coffee in the staff room. Morales listened quietly without interrupting. Then he asked one question. "What cell?" Reyes shrugged casually. "Cell 14. Morales froze mid-sip. For several seconds, he simply stared into his coffee cup without speaking. The room suddenly felt colder somehow. Finally, Morales muttered quietly, "That cell should have stayed sealed." Reyes laughed awkwardly and asked what he meant, expecting another ghost story from an older deputy. But Morales never smiled. He explained that years earlier, several officers requested permanent closure of Cell 14 after repeated incidents involving inmates hearing voices inside the walls. Administrators ignored the complaints because overcrowding made every usable cell valuable. He stopped sleeping and constantly screamed at invisible people nobody else could hear. The inmate claimed something beneath the cell kept whispering his name every night. 3 days later, officers found him dead inside the cell, hanging from tied bedsheets. Curiosity slowly began eating at Reyes after that conversation. During a quiet shift several nights later, he accessed archived incident reports connected to D Block from an old computer terminal in the records office. Most files were incomplete because older jail records had been digitized poorly over the years. But eventually, he located the final report connected to Cell 14. Inmate name, Darnell Pike. Status, deceased. Location, D Block, Cell 14. Reyes carefully read through the report while the hum of fluorescent lights filled the silent office around him. Pike had reportedly suffered violent paranoid episodes during his final weeks alive. Mental health staff evaluated him repeatedly after he claimed someone hidden inside the walls was speaking to him every night. Officers documented multiple incidents where Pike screamed at empty corners of the cell or begged deputies not to leave him alone after lights out. Eventually, staff believed he suffered severe psychosis triggered by isolation and stress. Then came the final report. Officers discovered Pike hanging from tied bedsheets attached to the bunk frame shortly after 2 a.m. Medical staff pronounced him dead at the scene. Suicide. Case closed. But one detail near the bottom of the report disturbed Reyes deeply. Before his death, Pike had scratched a message directly into the concrete wall, using something sharp enough to cut through paint. The report mentioned the message was photographed and removed from public documentation afterward. Reyes leaned closer to the screen, trying to locate the missing photograph. Then his radio suddenly crackled alive. "Unit 12 copy?" Reyes grabbed the radio instinctively. "Go ahead." The dispatcher's voice sounded uneasy. "D Block, Cell 14 intercom activation." Reyes slowly looked toward the digital clock mounted above the records desk. 2:13 a.m. Exactly. For a moment he simply stared at the numbers glowing red inside the dark office while chills crawled across his arms. Then something unexpected happened. Reyes volunteered to check the unit himself. Part of him still believed there had to be a rational explanation behind the activations. Faulty electronics. Damaged wiring, maybe even another officer secretly triggering the system as a prank. Reyes grabbed his flashlight and began walking toward D Block through the underground hallway officers called the tunnel. The deeper he moved into the facility, the quieter everything became. Normal jails, sounds faded behind thick concrete walls until only distant ventilation fans remained. The first security gate buzzed open slowly, then the second. Reyes stepped inside D Block alone. Dust coated the floors. Rust stains streaked down cell bars. Entire sections of ceiling paint hung loose above the empty tier. His flashlight beam swept across rows of abandoned cells, frozen in darkness. Then it stopped on cell 14. Empty. Completely empty. Reyes approached cautiously, while static hissed softly through nearby speakers. Suddenly, the intercom inside the cell exploded with deafening static, so loud it made him jump backward. The static slowly changed into another sound. Breathing. Wet. Uneven breathing like somebody struggling to inhale through water-filled lungs. Reyes immediately grabbed his radio. "Control, do you hear this?" Several seconds passed before dispatch answered, but the dispatcher no longer sounded calm. "Unit 12, who's inside the cell with you?" Reyes frowned in confusion. "What are you talking about?" The dispatcher hesitated before answering quietly. "Thermal cameras are showing 2 heat signatures inside D block." Every muscle in Reyes's body tightened instantly. He slowly turned toward the narrow reinforced window built into cell 14's steel door. At first, he saw only darkness inside the cell. Then his flashlight beam shifted slightly. Someone was sitting motionless on the lower bunk. Orange jail uniform, head hanging downward, completely still. Reyes whispered into the radio, "That cell's supposed to be empty." Then the figure slowly raised its head. The face looked horrifyingly wrong. Pale gray skin stretched tightly across visible bones. Eyes sunk deep inside black sockets. Lips pulled into an unnatural smile that looked almost painful. Reyes stumbled backward instinctively as the figure stood up from the bunk. Very slowly, very calmly. Then it began walking toward the door. Dispatch screamed through the radio for Reyes to leave immediately. But he couldn't move. The figure stopped inches from the small window and tilted its head sideways while staring directly into his eyes through reinforced glass. The figure's mouth opened slowly. At first, Reyes heard nothing except static hissing through the intercom. Then, faint whispering pushed through the speaker. The voice sounded distorted and wet, almost drowned beneath electrical interference. Reyes couldn't fully understand the words, but somehow his mind understood the meaning anyway. "You left me here." Suddenly, every light inside the block shut off at once. Complete darkness swallowed the tier instantly. Reyes' flashlight flickered violently in his trembling hand, while the intercom erupted into screaming static. Then came the first impact against the cell door. Boom! The steel shook violently. Another impact followed immediately. Boom! 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 Reyes backed away in panic while the entire door rattled like something inside was throwing itself against it with enormous force. Dispatch officers screamed through the radio demanding Reyes respond, but he could barely hear them over the noise. Then the banging stopped completely. Silence. Absolute silence. Reyes stood frozen in darkness trying to breathe normally again. Then he heard another sound much farther down the tier. Footsteps. Running footsteps. Fast. Too fast. His flashlight beam swung wildly toward the hallway, just in time to see a dark human-shaped figure sprinting directly toward him from the far end of D block. The way it moved looked horribly unnatural, with limbs jerking violently like bones snapping out of place while running. Reyes turned and ran for his life. His boots slammed against concrete while alarms screamed through his radio. Behind him, the footsteps grew louder impossibly fast. He risked one glance backward and immediately regretted it. The dark figure was charging down the hallway with terrifying speed, its body twisting unnaturally every few steps, like joints bending incorrectly beneath skin. Reyes reached the main security door separating D block from the tunnel and slammed his hand repeatedly against the emergency control panel. "Open! Open the damn door!" The heavy steel door began sliding painfully slowly across its track. Behind him, the footsteps thundered closer. Reyes could practically feel something breathing behind his neck now. The opening finally became wide enough for him to squeeze through sideways. He threw himself into the tunnel just as the security door slammed with explosive force. Silence followed instantly. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. Reyes lay shaking on the concrete floor while backup officers rushed toward him from Central Control. Several deputies immediately entered D Block armed with tasers and flashlights. They searched the abandoned housing unit thoroughly. Every cell, every hallway, every maintenance closet. Nothing was found. Cell 14 sat empty again, exactly as before. No intruder, no damaged wiring, no explanation. But officers discovered one thing inside the cell that had not been there earlier that night. Fresh scratches carved deep into the concrete wall beneath peeling paint. 4 words. "You left me here." The scratches looked fresh enough that concrete dust still covered the floor beneath them. Thermal cameras had detected a second heat signature inside D Block that night, but jail administration erased the incident and labeled everything an equipment malfunction. Even the camera footage disappeared. Later, Officer Morales revealed the truth. Multiple inmates who stayed in cell 14 claimed they heard whispers inside the walls before suffering mental breakdowns or dying. Some officers heard the voices too. According to Morales, D Block was never sealed because of mold damage. It was sealed because too many deputies became terrified of entering it alone after midnight. Weeks after the incident, Reyes secretly returned to D Block with Officer Morales. Inside cell 14, they discovered a section of concrete behind the bunk that sounded hollow. After breaking through part of the wall, they uncovered an old maintenance tunnel, hidden beneath the jail. The narrow passage was covered with scratches, names, dates, and desperate messages carved into the concrete over many years. Some looked decades old, others appeared fresh. But one phrase repeated everywhere in different handwriting. "He talks at night." Morales admitted the county planned sealing the tunnel after multiple inmate deaths, but repairs were delayed. Then Reyes heard something deep inside the darkness. Slow scraping sounds, followed by faint whispering, quietly calling his name from underground. 6 months after D Block was sealed, Central Control received another emergency intercom activation from cell 14, exactly 2:13 a.m. Officers checked the thermal cameras and saw a single heat signature standing motionless inside the abandoned cell, waiting. By morning, the figure was gone. But maintenance later confirmed something impossible. The intercom wires connected to D Block had already been completely removed weeks earlier. Yet, somehow, the call still came through. Some officers believe D Block was haunted. Others think years of violence and death poisoned the minds of everyone who entered that unit. But one question still has no explanation. If cell 14 was permanently sealed, then who activated the emergency intercom after the wires were removed? If you enjoyed this horror story, subscribe to Taka Tales Stories. Some places should never be reopened.